All right. We're taking all the best old school wisdom and blending it with the top new school methods to bring you the optimal coaching strategies. This is the 80/20 Baseball Podcast with Coach Bo.
Welcome, youth coaches and youth parents, and I know some youth baseball players listening to this. Welcome to this week's get-together here at 80/20 Baseball, where we're trying to go from new coaches to good coaches, or for those of you that have been doing it a little while, from good coaches to great coaches as efficiently as we can. Always great to be here with all of you. We got part 2 of our interview with Coach Tommy Hansen, strength and conditioning coach, who really understands the youth sports world and the benefits and the nuances of the strength and conditioning component within the youth sports world, and in our case, youth baseball. He's going to dive into quite a bit. 40 minutes of interview coming your way right now. He's going to give an interesting viewpoint on sport specialization versus players playing multiple sports. He's going to answer the question, how do we reduce injuries in baseball, and how can we use strength and conditioning to help our players get hurt less often? He's also going to share out what he thinks are the key parts to a successful strength and conditioning program for youth baseball players. He's also going to share what he's seen as the most common mistake that youth baseball players and their parents make when it comes to strength and conditioning. And he'll dive into a few other topics, such as balancing a strength and conditioning program that yields results, but also allows for proper rest and recovery while minimizing injury risk. So with that said, let's dive into part 2 of our interview with Coach Tommy Hansen. What are your thoughts on sport specialization versus multi-sport participation for youth athletes?
I take an approach that many, especially the older generation, doesn't necessarily agree with, but it makes sense, and it'll make sense in a minute. So specialization, in my opinion, is not a problem unless you navigate it the wrong way. So like growing up, I was told, because I'm 26, so my parents, all the other parents that all my friends that I was surrounded with were always telling me, you need to play multiple sports to become a more well-rounded athlete. Now, that's 100% true. I'm not saying don't do that. I played 4 sports growing up, so I was one of those that played tons of sports. I played 4 sports in high school. But at the same time, we now live in an environment where it's really hard to get recruited, and it's really hard to build a really high level of skill if you do not, at least, you don't have to specialize and play one sport, but you're going to have to focus and spend most of your time and energy on something in order to get ahead on the skill side. And so for kids, as long as you're filling the gap outside of your sport, so I'm seeing, because I work with a lot of volleyball players too, volleyball and baseball are very similar. It's a very early specialization game. And so I don't necessarily think doing that's a problem, but if all you do is pitch year round, say you're a pitcher and your coach has said, you're only going to pitch, you're in 6th grade, you're only going to pitch from now until you go to college. And that's all you do, and you don't have a good strength program, you don't do any speed work, and all you do is show up and kind of pitch, that's going to be a problem, because there's no other motor skill development that you're going to get, because general motor skills will help you pick up specific skills in general. But also, as a kid, you should not be throwing 12 months out of the year, and you might lead to a lot of overuse injuries there. It's another one of those games, and I know a lot of the answers that I give on here, I know some people might be looking for yes or no, good or bad, but in reality, that doesn't exist. And if you've kind of noticed a theme with a lot of my answers, that's where I'm going to take, and it's going to be a lot of it depends. For younger kids, specializing, if that's the only sport the kid likes to play, and he has tried other sports but just doesn't like it, if he just wants to play baseball at 7th grade, there's no issue in doing it. Just make sure that you're filling the other gaps of make sure he's sprinting, make sure he's jumping, make sure he's lifting, make sure he lifts lower body, upper body. He's building that well-rounded motor skill development under load through lifting, and he's going to be healthier long-term, and he's going to develop more overall as an athlete long-term. So it's another one of those it depends situation. Just understand that if you are going the specialization route, you're going to have to seek out multiple other coaches and get a lot of really good other opinions from coaches in other disciplines to make sure you are still rounding out that athlete in a very good way.
Yeah, I think the biggest plus that I've seen with the multi-sport would be the mental break. There's some players I've coached over the years that don't need a mental break from baseball. They could play it 12 months out of the year, and they could play it from the time they're 4 until the time they're done. Maybe that's college or pro, and they don't tire out of it. But I think by and large, the mental break by playing another sport or another activity, even if it's not a sport. But I think what you're saying, and I've thought about this over the years, if it's just to build a better athlete. And if you're saying, if a parent's like, hey, I want them to play multiple sports so they're a better athlete. Sometimes I think if it's not the former issue, it's not the burnout. There's no burnout, which again, I think most kids benefit from taking a break. I know you mentioned arm and not throwing and pitching and, giving some time off of your arm. But I'm just saying, just in general, like getting a little bit of a break from anything for most players I've seen is beneficial. Again, there's those outliers that it doesn't matter. But I think if it's to build a better athlete, that is the purpose of a parent signing up their kid or trying to get them into multi-sports or multi-sport athlete. It would almost be better if that player is really into that sport and doesn't really care for other sports. Stick with that one sport, say baseball, and then get yourself in a really awesome strength and conditioning program.
I agree with you. I think that if you're a parent, I'm not a parent yet, but if I were to parent my child through this, because I've seen it from highest levels of pro and college, and now at the youth level, I've kind of seen all of that and I've been through it myself. What I would do as a parent is if when they're really, really young, I would kind of force them into at least trying different sports a few times out of the year. But once they've tried it a few times, I would not hold it against them to be like, hey, you have to go play soccer this year. But if they show interest, like, you know what? I kind of like soccer when I was in 4th grade. I'm going to try it again in 6th. I would be all over that and encouraging it 100%. I have a kid that came in and trained with me, and they always came in either 2 to 3 days a week. Their mom texted me and said, hey, she wants to try cross country this year. She'll only be able to come 1 day a week. I immediately went to the girl and I was like, hey, go for it. Like, I'm glad you're trying something else. If it doesn't work out and you want to come back in here 2 days a week, go for it. But I want you to go try this new thing. And if it turns out something you really like, then you just start doing that more. I think it's a game of like, make sure you get them into these different things to at least give them a perspective on what it's like. But in the end, if they've tried all of it and they only like baseball or they only like volleyball, let them run with it. Just make sure that you're checking those other boxes and you're putting them in a situation that's not going to lead them to burnout. And I agree with you too. I've seen so many athletes where like, oh, they're going to burn out if they just play volleyball year round or baseball. They don't. Like some of them, like even like if they go 2 weeks without playing, they're going crazy. Like they're that into the game. And so I think you have to do another one of those, take it as whatever athlete's presenting in front of you and push them one way or another, depending on the signals that they're giving you. And so I agree 100% with you.
Maybe the mental image for the listeners would be, think of a funnel. And when kids are younger, before the age of 10, you, like Tommy said, get them into different activities. And then maybe, this is a general thought, a general image, but then maybe in junior high, boil it down. And then when they get to, high school, kind of work from there. I know for me, I played about 6 different sports up until junior high. And in junior high, I played 3 different sports. I went from like 6 to 3. And when I got to high school, I did play 3 my first year, but then I funneled it down to 2. And that allowed me quite a bit of time to focus on each one. Also getting a little bit of a mental break I thought was good. And it worked. And I was able to specialize enough to get scholarship offers in, pretty much every college in the country for both sports. And so it worked for me, but I think every player's different. And I think that's so important. And I love your answers. And I love when you say, hey, I'm not going to give yes and no answers necessarily. That's exactly what I think this world needs more of. I think we need nuanced answers. And then the listeners we got a really smart listener group here, Tommy. The listeners of this podcast I get emails, I talk to them. There's a smart group of people and they're going to be able to take your advice and fit it to their needs. I know they will. So I love where you're coming from. Now, moving on to the next question here, baseball injuries, right? So more specific, there might be concerns that parents have with their kids doing strength and conditioning, leading to more injuries. How do you address and prevent common baseball injuries through strength and conditioning? What are some things you do to, reduce, not eliminate, but to reduce the injuries that come about from baseball?
Yeah. Glad you used the word reduce, because injury prevention is a word that's thrown out there and you can do everything right and you still can't prevent all injuries. But there are obviously things you can do to reduce the risk and put yourself in a better position to succeed. What I've noticed over the years, and it comes down to 2 things. One is since they're playing their sport, you can play your sport year round, but there needs to be a close watch on volumes and what they're doing. Because I've seen this happen a lot. I had a kid last year who had an issue with his elbow, and he actually had to have a surgery on his elbow. It wasn't Tommy John, but he had a small stress fracture in his elbow. And he was in a sling for a while. And then he did the rehab, he did all that stuff. But he went back to his practices and immediately his coach had him throwing like across the diamond hard. And then he threw 100 pitches within 6 weeks of the surgery in a game. I mean, if you do that, there's no way you can prevent that injury from happening. The only thing you can do is pull back and say, hey, let's be smart. This kid probably should have thrown 100 pitches 6 weeks after his surgery. That was a ridiculous idea. And so it comes down to two things. One, are you taking the necessary physical precautions? Meaning, are you in that well-rounded strength training program? And when it comes to that, when we look at baseball, what do we see? We see elbows, we see shoulders primarily. And if you look at that, the best thing to do, like if you're a jumper, you have knee issues. If you're a thrower, you have shoulder and elbow issues. When it comes to that though, the best things that you can do is one, work on those areas, but also work on the areas around them, and then work on the sequencing in your pitching and everywhere else so that your mechanics are super sound, so that other joints are taking a lot of the brunt of the force and it's not just being thrown on your shoulder. And so an example of that would be like if you are throwing, and there's some guys that tend to rotate very, 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 very early. So like if you go into like a pitch and you're in your hip load and you're going into your delivery, some people will not hold their hinge is what they call it. So your back hip load, they will not hold it down the mound as well as they should. And they turn and they rotate, and then they put all their stress on that shoulder and they accelerate their arm really quick because they're trying to catch up to early rotation. I know this sounds very complicated, but like it's really hard to explain this without a video showing it. But in general, because your mechanics are being thrown off, you're forced to speed up your arm and your shoulder's taking all of that impact. Instead of it being, I'm going to hold all this tension in my hip, transfer it to my other foot and have my hip, my knee, my back, my shoulder, and my hand kind of have an even distribution of all those forces. And so again, it's another one of those overcompassing views of, is my mechanics sound enough that it's protecting the joints that are most vulnerable by making sure that the bigger joints are doing big jobs and protecting the smaller joints. And that's mostly going to be from mechanics, and that's mostly going to be from protecting it through strength conditioning. So are you doing your rotator cuff stuff? Do you have strong biceps? Do you have strong forearms? Are they able to handle supination and pronation under load? Are you training all those things? If you are, you're putting yourself in a better position. But then again, if we go back to the sports side, you can have the greatest mechanics, you could have a great strength conditioning program, but if you're going out and you're long tossing every day and you're throwing way too many pitches, you cannot protect yourself. So then again, that's where the communication between the sport coach and the strength coach goes, hey, based on my experience and understanding how workloads affect the body, they probably should have a light toss day today. They should fluctuate high days, low days. Make sure that you have the week set up for you to succeed and that you're kind of matching intensities at the right time so you're not overloading. And so I think the big issue is that many travel teams and even in colleges in general, they're trying to show their kids and their parents that they're working these kids really, really hard. But oftentimes, because obviously the parents are paying for their services. If you go to a travel team and the coach goes, you know what, we're just going to light toss, do a little bit of foam rolling and take some swings today. The parent's like, oh, I just wasted my money. But in reality, you, as a parent, you should thank them if they're doing that the right way to protect your kid long term. And so it's one of those slippery slopes of like the kids are paying for the services, but also my job is to keep these kids on the field and keep their performance high. So sometimes it might seem like they're not getting a ton out of the training session, but it should be a strategic method and plan to follow to kind of check all those boxes to keep them healthy. And if you aren't doing the sports side, the strength and conditioning side, and the sequencing side, you are not going to protect yourself to the maximum capacity. So you have to put all those into play. And if you don't, there's going to be one of those that are lagging behind that's going to put you at risk.
I think for listeners, that's a big one. Like, okay, the player has a great strength and conditioning routine. They're working with Tommy. They got a great routine, but their pitching delivery is garbage. And like Tommy mentioned, holding the hinge, down the mound, or commonly known for a long time as flying open.
That's the term. That's the term I was looking for. That I didn't say that, but that's exactly what I was trying to describe. Yes.
Yeah. So that's an example of a pitching delivery issue that could cause a lot of injury, or definitely could increase the likelihood of injury. You have the volume that a kid's pitching, you have the volume that they're playing, you have nutrition, you have sleep, definitely a lot of things. And I think one thing I got out of, and it kind of came to mind when you were talking there, is for parents, when you go to these coaches, and if it's not you coaching as the kids get older, you're looking for a strength and conditioning coach or a pitching coach or a hitting coach or what have you, you always have to ask yourself, what's their motive? And just always kind of think about what their motive might be. And a lot of times it's awesome. It's a great motive and they're in it for the kid and the kid comes first. if you get that sense that their motive is to play more games, to play more tournaments, to cash in more, or to play more because they think that's better or whatever. And maybe playing more is a good fit for that time and for that team and that kid at that time. But you always have to kind of ask yourself, what's their motive? And are they thinking of my player, my kid, my child holistically? So we talk about preventing injuries by using strength and conditioning. That's one measure of success. I hear a lot from strength and conditioning coaches is keeping players healthy and out on the field. But how would you measure progress and success in a youth baseball strength and conditioning program? What are some of the key parts that you would measure to see if a player is, or I should say, whether the program is successful in progressing the players forward?
Yeah. So for progress, I think the older you get, the more those metrics become important. Obviously, if you have a pitcher in high school or college, getting them from sitting 88 to sitting 92 is going to be a massive difference on their potential to play at the next level. And so those numbers, as you get older, become increasingly important. But as a kid, if you're in elementary or middle school, I don't care at all what those numbers are. And the thing is, I think the younger you are, the more subjective you can be with your progress. You can definitely do it with older athletes as well. But for kids, I've noticed that when you put numbers to things and you put a large emphasis on the numbers, they begin to think that if I don't beat this number, I have not progressed and I'm getting worse. And I think that's a really bad mentality to get into. Meaning, so if I have an athlete, so I measure their vertical jumps, I measure their sprint times, I do all that stuff with my kids, but I don't do it ultra often because I've noticed that if I do it like once a week or every 2 weeks, and as we know, you're going to have fluctuations of good days, bad days, you're going to have plateaus, you're going to have all these things. And if you test all the time and you pound into the kids that these metrics are really, really important, they're going to get very discouraged quickly when they realize they aren't progressing as fast as they should be. And I say should be, but in reality, we know that progress takes time. They want that progress really quickly. And if they aren't seeing the number go up, they're going to get discouraged. So my advice is, can you find other subjective ways to show them they are getting better? Like, for example, like we spoke about earlier, are they showing better technique on their squats? Are they showing better technique on their sprinting? Are they showing that they can pick up new movement challenges? So if I give them a new agility drill, at first, if they struggle to like think about it and have to react and it took them a while to pick it up, now they're just, give me a drill, I can do it on the spot. That's progress. And so you have to find other subjective ways, and as many as you can, to show them that they're getting better at it. And so for me, for kids, like if you want to go to the baseball side, yeah, you can tell a kid, yeah, you went from 60 to 65 on an exit velo off a tee, but also, can they hit the 4-hole? Can they hit the 6-hole? Can they hit the ball in the air if they want to? Are they getting more backspin on different swings? Are they taking pitches they should be taking? Like, there's so many other ways that you can prove to them that they're getting better other than something that's a metric that you can track. If you look at like Driveline, what they're doing, they are so good at understanding data and understanding where data drives performance. And I think that's very, very valuable. But for a lot of people who don't have the access or understanding of how to use those metrics, just throwing random numbers at kids or even high school and college athletes just to kind of throw numbers at them to show that you're doing something with technology doesn't always mean success. If you're a pitcher, you can throw harder, but can you paint? Do you have good pitch sequencing? Do you know how to throw to certain hitters? There's so many other ways that I think that you can give athletes success. And the more ways you can do it subjectively, I think the better, especially for kids.
I've been a big fan of Driveline since their inception when Kyle started the whole thing. And I've visited Driveline a few times. I've gone over and done the tour and gone through. I was over there in May, checking out their new facility. But again, you're right. It's just a piece it's not the entire puzzle. It's a piece to the puzzle. But nonetheless, what do you think about using numbers to just kind of gamify training and make it competitive, kind of lift up that motivation to go a little harder?
I think that's a great idea. And so that's the thing is technology is only as good as if you know how to utilize it and you know how to use the data to drive your programming. And so you can take athletes and force plate test them. You can take athletes and radar test them. You can test med ball throws. You can test all these different things. But you have to understand, does that data make differences in the programming you're already going to give the kid? So like, I love the idea of using technology to gamify. But like when it comes to baseball, like I'll track velos on kids' exit velocities if I'm pitching, if I'm soft tossing to them or something. But I'll also tell them, I'm like, if you start swinging as hard as you can and you make this into just a super fun joke around fest where you're not taking it seriously, I'll take the data right away from you. And so you have to have this fine line of use the data to get what you want to get out of training and out of your sessions, and then use that data to further your programming. And if you aren't doing those two things, you don't need the data and you don't need the numbers at all. So I could get great results with kids hitting and strength and conditioning without tracking anything, because there's other subjective ways to do that. And a lot of the stuff that I'm already doing, I was going to do whether I track the data or not. But if you understand how to use those little pieces of data that you have to drive slight differences in your programming in the weight room, but also how to drive different drills to work on those things. Say a kid has an issue with, he doesn't hit the ball hard because of X in his mechanics. You can test that velo, and then you can be like, hey, I want you to try this, video it, show him that he made that adjustment. And then the velo goes up and you're like, hey, look, the velo went up because you did this. And so if you can use that to drive your programming, I think it's extremely valuable. But I think we also have tons of coaches that try to prove to athletes they know what they're doing by tracking a million different things, when in fact, they're going to do the same program anyway. So you got to know what you're doing with it.
100%. What's a common mistake that you see youth baseball players or their parents make when it comes to strength training? Is there something that kind of in your experience, is there a mistake that parents or youth baseball players, and we might have hit on it a little bit before, but I just want to highlight if there is a common mistake that you see youth baseball players or parents make when it comes to strength and conditioning?
Yes, there's one big one that stands out, and I see it all the time. You hear probably on the baseball side all the time. You got a kid that comes in, they're like, oh, I watched a video of Mike Trout swing and I'm going to change my swing and do this because he does it. That happens all the time in strength and conditioning. A kid will come by and be like, hey, I was watching Tom Brady workout videos and he only uses bands. Like, why don't we do that? And then I have to explain to him like, hey, one, you're not Tom Brady. And two, a lot of the stuff that you can't look at one athlete and think that what they do is good for everybody. Meaning some athletes will do really, really good back squatting. Other ones won't. So if you see a professional athlete back squatting, but when you do it, your back gets really compressed and it feels really, really bad and you hate it, then if you hate doing it, it's not going to have the same benefit for you than does somebody else. And then if you see some athletes doing like agility ladders and they're like, oh, I saw this guy, he's really fast. I saw Tyreek Hill doing agility ladders. Why don't we do more stuff like he does? And so you have to be really good at navigating those things as a coach, but also as a parent, understanding that if your coach should be able to break that down for you and be like, hey, just because you saw that as a professional athlete doing it doesn't mean that your kid necessarily needs that at this point in time. And if your coach can't go through that and explain exactly why you either don't do that or you use another alternative instead, then you probably don't have a very good coach. But understand that just because you see somebody of high status doing something does not mean that it's a good fit for you. And I think that's a big issue that not only in baseball, but all sports, don't look at something somebody else is doing and think that that's the missing key component that you need that's going to lead to all these results, because it doesn't work that way. Bring that idea up to your coach and he should be able to say, you know what, let's experiment with that. Maybe that is a good fit. Let's see if it works. But they should be able to put that whatever drill you're seeing within the context and know where to apply it or not to apply it at all.
You're definitely hitting the nail right on the head there with not just copying one athlete. And I think of this, I have an article on the website and I forget what it's titled. I wrote it years ago, but originally I had it may still be titled Copy Correctly. Basically, it's a picture on the article. It's a picture of a kid watching a game and he's in the stands, a youth player-ish, and he's looking out watching a pro game or whatnot. And it's like, hey, copy correctly. And there's two big flaws when you're copying one player or specifically like one pro. And the two flaws that I see is assuming you are exact replica of that pro player. Okay. And you alluded to the differences and assuming that we are an exact replica. One, they're a lot bigger, stronger, have a lot more time. And there's a lot of, right off the bat, we can think of a lot of differences. I'm not saying that's a specific reason not to do what they're doing. I'm just saying there's some flaws and some caution there because assuming that you're an exact replica, their body frame, their genetic, yada, yada, yada. And then the other thing too is those players or those athletes that are doing a workout routine, I see this in strength and conditioning and definitely on the field, assuming that what that pro player who's an all-star is, that one specific thing you're trying to copy, assuming that that's the reason they're successful or to what degree that increases their success, that can be a massive assumption and very erroneous. And for example, Gary Sheffield, retired, but he used to wiggle his bat. Most of the listeners listening to this grew up with Gary Sheffield on the TV. I actually caught a home run ball from Gary Sheffield in a major league game at Dodger Stadium. But Gary Sheffield would wiggle and waggle his bat over his head, right? And it was this famous move that he did that most of the listeners know exactly what I'm talking about. And so then here I am at, 11 years old, and I'm doing the same thing with my bat because Gary Sheffield's successful, thus if I wiggle and waggle my bat over my head, or even worse, like Julio Franco, who would put it, almost point it around towards the pitcher, the top of the barrel, the top of the bat towards the pitcher, I would do that and think, oh, they're good because they do that thing. And as I got older and more mature, I realized just because pro players are doing a specific thing doesn't mean that's why they're all-stars and pro players. They could be they could be successful in spite of that thing they're doing. So I think those are the two things that I caution with. And I say, look for the commonalities. What do you think about that?
I think it's funny bringing up Gary Sheffield because I've definitely seen my share of Gary Sheffields come in for my hitting lessons. So I've definitely seen that one. The kids come in, start wiggling their bat. I'm like, what YouTube did you watch this weekend? I've also had kids that come in that they'll have here's another good example. I have one kid who always is watching different pro athletes with his dad, and they're breaking down swing mechanics and all this stuff, which is good. I'm really glad the kids are going in and kind of looking at these details, because if they do that, a lot of times it resonates with them better. So I'm not cautioning against that. They should definitely go watch in detail what mechanics these hitters are doing. And also too, just because they want to change something, I don't think it's a bad idea to also let them experiment with something. Like I've had one kid that he would always do kind of like, not a high leg, but kind of like a mid leg kick when he would swing. And then I noticed one day, like he went to a toe tap, and I'm like, who are you watching? I can't remember who he had said, but he went to a toe tap. And then after that, I was like, you know what? Let's try a high leg. He came in another day and he was watching like Javi Baez or something. And I was like, who are you watching this week? He's like, I was watching Baez. He was hit some home runs this week. I'm like, okay. So we experimented with a toe tap. We experimented with a mid leg. We experimented with a high leg. And I noticed after we recorded him that his sequencing and timing was much better when he did a high leg, even though that's something he had not done previously. And then when he put that into play, his parents were like, wow, he's like hitting a lot better. And I'm like, all we changed was that we had a high leg. And the only reason we changed that is because he was watching Javier Baez this past week. And honestly, that was one change that we found works for him. And so it's not a bad thing. I encourage kids. You hear all the time, like kids will go out, they'll watch an NBA game and they'll see like James Harden or Steph Curry do a crazy move and they'll go try to replicate it. If you can go replicate that and you can put that into a game, why not? But like the thing is, again, it comes back to, do you have a coach that's able to filter that information and be like, hey, we've worked at it quite a bit. I don't think this is for you. But I think that they should go out and try all these different things, because when you're a young kid, what's there to lose? You're supposed to experiment with as many things as you can. And as you get older, you'll find things that work, but you won't know unless you actually try them. So I think that's actually a good thing that they do that. Just make sure that you know how to filter that the right way so you don't send yourself down the wrong path.
I think a good way to filter that, Tommy, is think longitudinal with it. So like you have the example, the high leg lift from your hitter, and then he goes out and he's smoking the pitches the next weekend. Or one thing I would say is like, let's see if this carries through the season, right? So it very well could have been the adjustment that, got him going, the catalyst to kind of getting that season going or whatnot. I think we have to look at things like maybe like for a pitcher, you make an adjustment, all of a sudden they go out and deal and they pitch great. You could, what you just face, the next 3 teams they faced were not good. And their arm actually felt better because they got some rest, or, sometimes the stars align with arms feeling good. Anybody who's pitched before, some days you just wake up and your arm feels great. Some days it doesn't. So just because we did a deeper hinge and worked on that the week before doesn't mean that specifically was it. But if you write it out over the course of 2 months, it's got to be longitudinal. Like Tommy's saying there, to see if it's something that really is going to make a difference and really is the thing that's making the difference. The variable that was adjusted is a good fix, is a long-term fix. Now, we talked about technology a little bit, and I know with youth baseball and youth sports, technology, of course, is not used as much, and for the great reasons you've mentioned. But has it impacted your approach to strength and conditioning? I know you're younger. Has it always been something you've done and used technology? Well, what about things like force plates too? I'm just going to throw out like I was thinking about a drive line that had force plates. But how has technology impacted your approach to coaching, strength and conditioning coaching in recent years? And maybe what also, I'll just tie on, like, what are your thoughts on like things like force plates for youth players? Is that even something they should do?
I think if you look at any technology, so force plates included, if it's a fun way to get kids to kind of try to beat their numbers or get good intent in their training, because what it really comes down to is what are we chasing when it comes to, when we're timing sprints, yes, we're tracking progress, but we're also ensuring that rep specifically was done as fast as they possibly can. You can take force plates and you're like, jump as high as you possibly can. Just by them trying to beat their number, even if they don't beat it, they're getting really, really good reps because they are giving all their 100% effort and the best output they possibly can. So there is tremendous benefit to doing it. It's just that you don't really necessarily need the technology is kind of like another way of saying, put them in an environment where they have no choice but to give their best effort and you'll get their best effort. And so like, that's where especially for youth, that's where I've kind of drifted towards a little bit with most of my technology. Yeah. With the exit velo stuff, like, yeah, that's good for tracking, and we could do sprint timing. That's really good for tracking. But in the end, a lot of times just giving them that technology improves their focus and makes sure that their rep is done 100% focus and effort. If that's what you're getting out of your technology and you find that to be useful and the kids like it, go for it. But just know you don't need it. If you can do other environments to force them to do the exact same thing, then you don't have to spend all the money to get the technology. So there's ways of doing it, but I use it just to switch it up to give them a wide variety. But just understand you don't really need it as long as you know what you're doing and put them in the right environment to succeed.
Right? Just a basic stopwatch and a measuring tape or a yardstick. If you're doing like vertical things, some of the basic measuring tools can be all the, let's say, quote unquote, technology you need. I always tell coaches, hey, you need a stopwatch. I think every coach out there at practice should have a stopwatch. And it's not so much just to like, all right, what's your time from home to first base, but just keeping things moving. A lot of youth baseball players don't understand urgency or even understand how fast they can move, how fast they can jump, or how far they could until you kind of extrinsically motivate them to do it. And I think like a stopwatch or even just measuring their vertical, like, oh, I didn't even know I had that extra 30% in the tank to push off the ground, to get off the ground and go. So that's kind of what I'm hearing. And if you have those things to gamify it, that's awesome. Did you want to add anything to that, Tommy? Or
No,
I feel like we hit that pretty good?
I think we hit that one pretty good.
Awesome. So how do you balance building strength in youth baseball players with the need for rest and recovery?
I like this question because I actually just did a post on this recently, this exact topic. A lot of people assume, and so I think a lot of this comes down to people's perception of training, meaning you can get very strong and get really good results out exhausting your athletes whatsoever. And so I've had a lot of athletes that are like, you know what? And I mean, I know we talk about baseball in this discussion, but right now volleyball season's going on. I've had volleyball athletes that are like, I don't want to train during season because I got lots of games. I don't want to be tired for my sport. And I'm like, the first thing I always say is that you're under the assumption that training will not be altered to meet the demands of what you're doing outside of baseball or volleyball. But in terms of baseball, one thing that can help you out a lot is understanding that little doses over time is better than just dropping it for the sake of being tired. And now, yes, there's going to be situations where you are extremely exhausted and need to take a day off. I'm not saying that doesn't exist, but if you come in and you do a 30 to 40 minute workout and you only hit 2 or 3 sets on 4 exercises, that's still going to compound over time. And so when it comes to burnout, it's going to be like, again, your coach has to understand the situation that's at play. And luckily, I work with small enough groups in my facility to where if I have 10 kids come in and 2 of them are like, you know what, I'm not feeling like the greatest today. I've done this. And we kind of run through what their last few weeks have done. I can give them an alternative workout and let them leave feeling better than when they walked in. And so understand as a parent or as a player that your coach should not be just bringing you in and exhausting you to try to show that they did something or that you leave feeling accomplished because you're exhausted. Because exhausted does not mean progress. If you're coming in and your coach can modify that, understand that doing workouts during season, during a very competitive schedule, you can still do that if it's done the right way. Think about major league guys. Those guys are playing 5 or 6 days a week and they're training 3 to 4 days a week during that time as well. Tons of travel. They're very stressed out, but they're managed to get in. And even if it's a 20-minute dose of something, that's all you need. And so get the perception out of your mind that training is going to exhaust you, because if you do it the right way, training can actually fuel you to keep going. And so I want to make sure that was a good distinction there, because I think that's something that's misperceived often when it comes to training during competitive sports seasons.
Tommy, I really appreciate your time here. This next question, what's an innovative or unconventional training method that you've been experimenting with or even had success with youth baseball players?
Maybe it's innovative. I don't know. I've kind of evolved my approach a little bit with all the athletes that I train, all my youth athletes, and even honestly, my high school athletes. Like when I was growing up, I mean, I say growing up as if I'm old, but going up in school, in college, learning about strength and conditioning, going through my certifications, all these things, I was always under the impression that like you had to keep exercises in the program for 4 weeks, for 6 weeks, and then you cycle every month. And that's how long it takes to adapt. And I've kind of honestly drifted away from that a lot. And I've noticed that I've gotten a lot better results the more sporadic. I know this is going to sound very counterintuitive because I just preached for about an hour that consistency is really important. when it comes to like the plyometric and speed work of all my youth athletes, I change that up every single day. For the lifting, I like to keep the lifting consistent just because if you change up a lifting exercise or stimulus too often, you're going to be very sore very often. So when it comes to lifting, I keep it very similar. So like I changed my Instagram name to it's Freestyle Jump Guy. That's just a cool tag name that I have, but it kind of encompasses what I do now is plyometrics. If I got kids coming in 3 days a week, I'll have 3 different jump workouts and then they'll come in the next week. We'll do similar stuff, but we'll do different exercises. Most coaches, in my experience that I've been around, and I know I'm in a smaller environment. I don't work with like 30, 40 athletes at one time often. I mean, I do it with the volleyball club that I work with, but at the same time, like I've noticed better results from my jump training and athleticism in general, the more sporadic and random my jump training has gotten. Now, don't think I'm just plugging random exercises in. There's still an approach to it, but I've increased the variability in what we do so much. And I've just seen such a positive response to that. And so I don't know, in my experience, that's what a lot of people aren't doing, but maybe they are now and I just haven't heard about it. But that's kind of what I've been experimenting with over the last year. And I couldn't be more happy with what I've seen. Because when it comes to jumps and sprints, either way, you're running fast and you're moving fast. If you're jumping, whether you're jumping off one leg or 2 legs or you're running or you're not, you're still jumping fast, high, and far. Just do it different ways. And your body doesn't really care if you have slight alterations. And so like, I guess if that's an innovative or an unconventional approach, maybe. Well, I mean, according to kind of what I've been taught growing up, it would be unconventional. But I've heard a few other coaches doing that here at the same time, and they've seen the same thing. So I don't know. That's kind of just what I've experienced with. And I couldn't be more happy with what I've seen.
I think you're onto something there, but let's just kind of back up and kind of look from that 30,000 foot, 35,000 foot view of the sports that we're playing, the kids are playing, and the games. There will never be a game, and I mean, I don't know how many thousands of baseball games I played that were exactly the same, that all the same plays and all the exact same movements were replicated. There's massive variety in every game. So, a shortstop will probably never make the exact same diving play in their career, the exact same, from the exact same angle at the exact same speed, based on how many steps they took with the, throwing from the knees or getting up or throwing from their butt or jumping up and throwing or to second base, to first base, to third base, wherever. The variety of movement in a game is so vast. So why make our training so specific and just box it with we're going to do these 10 movements? And so I think you're onto something there, because if we back up and look at what the goal is and then let that drive our methods. Again, speaking of methods, I think it's important not to be married to the methods, but married to the results that we're trying to achieve. I think a lot of coaches throw out, trust the process, don't worry about the results. I love the idea of trust the process, but don't be married to your process. Save being married with your spouse. Do not marry your methods, but trust them enough to write them out to see that they either are, and that kind of goes with that longitudinal approach, to see if they are actually working, right? You can't just flip-flop week to week and expect to really ascertain and really see accurately what is moving the needle and what is not. I do think it's important that you're not married to the methods, but married to the goal and the results that you're actually seeing out on the field and with your athletes. When you started talking about adding variety to the workouts, I was thinking strategic variety. And I'm like, Tommy's doing strategic variety. It's not willy-nilly. Oh, we're randomly doing whatever. It's like you're just pulling stuff out of a hat or Googling what's a random thing I can do today. But you're strategically implementing and infusing variety into your routines, your program. Does that sound right?
And I wanted to add something to what you just said, because you made a really good point. You said that sports are non-replicable. You cannot do the same sport game twice in a row. You never know when you're going to find yourself in weird positions. And in training, if we've exposed ourselves to a million different positions, naturally in your sport, your body's going to kind of recognize that. So just because you jump forward off of one leg does not mean your body's going to know how to jump sideways off of one leg or jump on an angle with one leg. But the more you've done it, the more your body's going to instantly recognize that in a game and be able to do it. Like, you never know. As a pitcher, when you're running to first base and a guy throws the ball to first base in a weird angle and you find yourself like falling over and your feet get caught really, really weird. If we've done that in training, more than likely, you're probably going to execute it and get the out still. Those are the type of thing where people are like, oh, that's not baseball specific. But at the same time, we're building really good movers. And if you've explored every avenue of human exploration of their movement, you're more than likely to recognize that in all the scenarios that follow. And so I think we get bogged down of doing, just do 3x5 box jumps because we're trying to jump higher. No, let's get really good at producing high outputs in as many situations as we can, off 2 foot, off 1 foot, check all those boxes, 2-foot jumping, 1-foot jumping, sideways jumping, bounding, check all those boxes in a million different ways. And your body will probably adapt pretty favorably in those scenarios.
So awesome. What role do you think virtual reality? I've seen there's a company here in Boise that does virtual reality strength training. It's to kind of gamify it and make it like a fun. You see virtual reality in batting cages and hitting more and more. But what do you think of virtual reality or augmented reality technology and how that might play a part in the future of youth baseball and strength and conditioning more specifically?
Well, I think it could be a great thing. Anytime you can challenge your brain in different ways, I think it'd be beneficial. So say you have a virtual reality thing where you're like, I want to do agility drills and I want to try to keep up with X athlete that's really fast. And they just plug you in a scenario where you're racing against Usain Bolt. I think putting yourself in those environments, or say like, oh, I want to defend Steph Curry, put me in a virtual reality and you're forced to defend him and try to like play defense on him. I think that could be a fun thing and also a good thing. And so, I mean, is it going to make you better at your sport in real time? I don't know. But I think any way that you can challenge any coordination of any sort, whether it's through virtual reality hitting, if a kid wants to go out to the backyard and hit against Chris Sale or something, that's fine with me. I don't think it should be the primary thing of your programming, but I also wouldn't knock it either. I think that'd be kind of a fun thing. And if kids manage to get better from doing it, I'm not going to say don't do it, but I'd have to try it myself to kind of see what it's like. I've never done virtual reality, so I don't really know. I know what it is, but I've never done it, so I don't know what it feels like. I can see it being beneficial if you do it the right way, I guess.
I appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much, Tommy, for your time. And this was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Great to be back and talk about some new things. And I had a good time. So appreciate you having me back on.
It's always great having you on, talking to Tommy. I look forward to hopefully doing this again down the road and catching up with you.
You as well, my man. Appreciate it.
All right, you take care. All right, that wraps up our interview with Coach Hansen. I think that one turned out really well. And I'm always trying to bring on coaches and folks that can directly help all of you listeners, all the great listeners of this podcast. Speaking of great listeners, a great way to give back to the podcast is to leave a review on your podcast app. That can be done in 3 or 4 minutes, and it really helps the show. We're going on 5 years, 250 plus episodes, no advertisements, no ads at all. I haven't plugged a product on here, at least one that I'm compensated for. Just trying to get this information out there to all of you so you can be good coaches, great coaches, and speed up that learning curve. And if you could leave a review, that helps get this message out to more people and would be greatly appreciated. Next week, I have a tip for us coaches that'll help us to not get so stressed out when our team makes mistakes, which is going to happen, no doubt, every game. So I have a specific tip, something we can do as coaches that should, in all likelihood, reduce our stress levels when our team makes mistakes. So we'll get to that next week. Got more information over at 8020baseball.com, articles, videos, and again, appreciate if you could leave a review for the podcast right there on your podcast app. And until next week, let's take care of our health so we can be great for our families, close friends, and we can be those great coaches that we want to be. Let's take this information. Let's go put it into play. All right, everyone, take care. Till next week, adios.
This has been the 80-20 Baseball Masterclass. Take it to the field.